Okay, so, that old idea of cybersecurity, like building a huge wall around our data, like a digital fortress, a castle.
Yeah, the classic castle and moat approach.
Exactly. It's like it made sense once upon a time, right? But it feels kind of outdated now, doesn't it? I mean, with everyone working remotely, bring your own device, cloud services everywhere. It's like the walls have kind of dissolved.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The traditional perimeter-based approach just doesn't cut it in today's world. The assumptions it was built on, that everything inside the network is inherently safe, well, those assumptions just don't hold up anymore.
So for this deep dive, we're going to explore a security model that's built for, this new reality zero trust architecture, or ZTA. And to guide our exploration, we're going straight to the source, the NIST Special Publication 800-207. This document really lays out the foundational principles and components of ZTA, the ABCs in a way.
Absolutely. And it's so crucial to understand those fundamentals, especially now with the threat landscape evolving so rapidly. This NIST document is really our roadmap for navigating this complex world.
Exactly. So before we jump in, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Zero Trust CISO. You can find a ton of great resources over at zerotrustciso.com. Now let's get back to ZTA. One of the things that struck me is that Zero Trust isn't really, a specific product or a piece of technology. It's more like a fundamental shift in how we think about security.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's a set of guiding principles, a philosophy, if you will, that shapes how we design our systems, our workflows, and really our entire approach to security operations. It's a journey, not a destination. It's about continuous improvement and adaptation.
Right, it's like a mindset change.
Yeah.
So one of the core principles is this idea of never trust, always verify. What does that really mean in practice? Like, how do you actually live that?
It means we have to completely abandon the assumption that just because a user or a device is inside the network perimeter, they're automatically trustworthy. Instead, every access request, every attempt to connect to a resource has to be explicitly verified, regardless of where the request is coming from or who's making it.
So whether I'm at my desk in the office or working from a coffee shop on my personal phone, I'm treated with the same level of scrutiny.
Precisely. That's the idea. Authentication, meaning proving who you are, and authorization, meaning what you're allowed to do, those become separate and very explicit steps that have to happen before any access is granted.
So no more free passes just because you're on the company Wi-Fi.
Exactly. So to put some more structure around this, NIST has defined 7 key tenets of zero trust design. These are like the non-negotiables, the core principles that have to be in place.
Okay, so let's break those down. What's tenet number 1?
The first tenet is that all data sources and computing services are considered resources. This means we need to think broadly about what we're protecting. It's not just about, servers and databases. It's about all the data, the applications, the services, the entire digital landscape.
So everything of value is a resource. What about tenet number 2?
Tenet number 2 states that all user accounts and network entities are considered subjects. And this includes not just human users, but also things like applications, services, automated scripts, anything that's trying to access those resources.
So resources and subjects, got it. What's next?
Tenet number 3 focuses on access and states that access to every resource is granted on a possession basis. This means there's no standing access. No more, I logged in once, so I'm good for the day. Every time a subject wants to interact with a resource, that access has to be reevaluated.
So it's like a constant check-in. Every time you need something, you got to prove you deserve it.
Precisely. Tenet number 4 builds on that and states that access to resources is determined by dynamic policy. These aren't static rules that are set in stone. They're constantly adapting based on a whole range of factors. Things like the user's identity, the security posture of their device, the sensitivity of the resource, the current threat landscape.
So it's not just about who you are, but also about the context of the request.
Exactly. And that adaptability is crucial in a world where threats are constantly evolving.
Makes sense. What about tenet number 5?
This one highlights the importance of continuous monitoring. It states that the enterprise monitors and measures the integrity and security posture of all owned and associated assets. This means we need to have systems in place that are constantly checking the health of our devices, our applications, our infrastructure, making sure they're up to date, patched, free of known vulnerabilities.
That's like a constant security checkup. What's tenet number 6?
Tenet number 6 reinforces that never trust, always verify principle. It states that all resource authentication and authorization are dynamic and strictly enforced before access is granted. There are no exceptions.
So even if I'm the CEO, I still got to go through the same checks and balances.
Absolutely. And finally, Tenet number 7 emphasizes the importance of data collection. It states that the enterprise collects as much information as possible about the current state of assets, network infrastructure, and communications. This includes things like logs, traffic patterns, device configurations, essentially as much data as we can gather. This data then feeds into our security systems, helps us make better decisions, and respond more effectively to threats.
So it's all about gathering intelligence to make better decisions.
Yeah.
What a shift from just, hoping the wall is high enough.
Precisely. So if we were to visualize a network through the zero trust lens, how would that change our perspective?
Yeah, it feels like a completely different way of looking at things.
The biggest change is that we can no longer assume that our internal network is this safe haven where everything is implicitly trusted. Instead, we have to operate under the assumption that an attacker could already be present within our network.
So even if I'm on the company network in the office, it's not automatically considered safe.
Exactly. We have to treat every device, every connection with a healthy dose of skepticism and verify everything. This also means that the security policies and the expected security posture have to be consistent regardless of where an asset is located. Whether an employee takes their laptop home or a workload is migrated to the cloud, the security standards shouldn't change.
So it's about creating a consistent and robust security environment that's not tied to a physical location. So we've talked about the principles, the mindset. Now let's get into the actual architecture. How does this all work in practice? What are the building blocks of a zero trust architecture?
NIST outlines 3 core logical components that work together to implement the zero trust model: the policy engine, the policy administrator, and the policy enforcement point.
Okay, so 3 key players. Let's start with the policy engine.
Yeah.
What's its role?
The policy engine, or PE, is essentially the brain of the system. It's responsible for making the ultimate decision on whether to grant or deny access to a resource. It does this by taking in a ton of information from various sources, things like the user's identity, the device they're using, the security posture of that device, the sensitivity of the resource being requested from the current threat landscape, and so on.
So it's like a central decision point constantly evaluating risk.
Exactly. And it uses what's called a trust algorithm to process all this information and make a determination.
A trust algorithm? That sounds intriguing. What is that exactly?
We'll dive into trust algorithms a bit later, but for now, just think of it as a set of rules and logic that the policy engine uses to weigh different factors and come to a decision.
Okay, so the policy engine makes the decision. Now what?
That's where the policy administrator comes in. The policy administrator, or PA, is responsible for actually executing the decision made by the PE.
Just like the enforcer.
Exactly. It communicates with the third component, the policy enforcement point, or PP. The PP is what actually enforces the access control rules. It can be a piece of software on the user's device, a gateway in front of a server, or a combination of different things.
So the PE makes the call, the PA relays the message, and the PEP is the one that actually opens or closes the door.
That's a great analogy. Now let's go back to the policy engine and talk a bit more about the data it uses to make those decisions.
Yeah, I'm curious about those sources of information. What kind of data is it looking at?
One crucial source is the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation System, or CDM. This system is constantly collecting information about the security posture of all enterprise assets.
So it's like a continuous security health check.
Exactly. It's looking at things like whether operating systems are patched, if approved software is installed, if there are any known vulnerabilities. The PE uses this information to assess the risk associated with a device making the access request.
So if my laptop is riddled with vulnerabilities, it's less likely to be granted access to a sensitive system.
Right. The PE also takes into account industry compliance requirements, making sure the organization is adhering to all relevant regulations. It also considers threat intelligence feeds, which provide up-to-date information about new attack techniques, emerging vulnerabilities, and malware threats.
So it's constantly staying informed about the bad guys' latest tricks.
Precisely. It also looks at network and system activity logs to get a real-time view of what's happening on the network. Is there any unusual traffic? Are there failed login attempts? These logs provide valuable insights.
It's like having eyes and ears everywhere.
Exactly. And of course, it considers the data access policies themselves, which define who should have access to what based on their role, their responsibilities, and the principle of least privilege.
Right. So you should only have access to the information you absolutely need to do your job.
Exactly. The PE also uses the Enterprise Public Key Infrastructure, or PKI, to manage digital certificates, which are used to strongly verify the identity of users and resources. And finally, it integrates with the ID management system where user accounts and their associated attributes are managed.
So it's pulling in information from a lot of different systems to get a complete picture.
And the more comprehensive and accurate that picture is, the better the PE can make those crucial access decisions. Now, I know we said we'd come back to trust algorithms, so let's dive into that a bit more.
Okay, so what exactly is a trust algorithm and what makes it tick?
Essentially, a trust algorithm is a set of rules and calculations that the policy engine uses to determine the level of trust for a given access request. It takes all those input factors we talked about, weighs them according to predefined criteria, and spits out a decision.
So it's like a mathematical formula for determining trust.
That's a good way to think about it. Now, there are different types of trust algorithms. One key distinction is between criteria-based and score-based algorithms. In a criteria-based approach, every single predefined security criterion has to be met in order for access to be granted. Think of it like a checklist where every box has to be ticked.
So it's very black and white.
Exactly. Now, a score-based algorithm is a bit more nuanced. It assigns a risk score to each factor and then calculates an overall score based on how those factors are weighted.
So it's more like a sliding scale of trust.
Right. And access is granted if the overall score meets or exceeds a predefined threshold.
So it allows for more flexibility.
Precisely. Another important distinction is between singular and contextual trust algorithms. A singular algorithm evaluates each access request in isolation without considering any past behavior.
So it's like every request is a blank slate.
Exactly. Now, a contextual algorithm takes into account the user's history, their typical behavior patterns, and other contextual information to make a more informed decision.
So it's like if I normally work from 9 to 5 and suddenly I'm trying to access sensitive data at 3 a.m., that might raise a red flag.
Precisely. And that's the power of a contextual algorithm. It can detect anomalies that a singular algorithm might miss.
So it's more intelligent in a way.
You could say that. So the choice of which type of trust algorithm to use really depends on the specific needs and the risk tolerance of the organization. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the network itself. What are some of the key network requirements for a zero trust architecture?
Yeah, I mean, the network is still the foundation, right? Even if we're rethinking how we use it.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, even though we're moving away from the idea of a trusted network, basic connectivity is still essential. We still need a robust network infrastructure that allows our devices and systems to communicate.
So the pipes still need to work.
Exactly. Second, the organization needs a reliable way to identify and authenticate its assets. We need to know definitively which devices are managed by the enterprise and what their security posture is.
So no more spoofing MC addresses or relying on flimsy authentication methods.
Right. We need stronger mechanisms like certificate-based authentication. Third, we need to be able to monitor all network traffic. Even if we can't decrypt everything due to performance or privacy concerns, we should at least be able to analyze metadata, things like source and destination, IP addresses, port numbers, traffic volume. This gives us valuable insights into what's happening on the network.
So it's about having visibility even if you can't see everything.
Exactly. Fourth, and this is a fundamental principle of zero trust. No enterprise resource should be directly reachable without going through a policy enforcement point.
So no more shortcuts.
Right. Every access request has to be mediated by a PP to ensure that policies are enforced. Fifth, for enhanced security, the control plane, which is used for managing the network and configuring policies, should be logically separated from the data plane, which handles the actual data traffic. This separation helps to prevent attacks on the control plane from directly impacting data flow.
It's like separating the brains from the brawn.
Exactly. Sixth, all enterprise assets need to be able to reach a policy enforcement point, whether it's a local agent, a network portal, or a cloud-based service. Seventh, the PEP should be the only component that talks directly to the policy administrator. This ensures that all policy decisions are centralized.
So it's like a single point of contact.
Precisely. Eighth, remote assets should be able to securely access resources without always having to connect back to the corporate network first. This can improve performance and simplify access for remote users.
So no more VPN tunnels for everything.
It depends on the specific implementation. But the goal is to make secure access as seamless as possible. Ninth, the entire ZTA infrastructure, including the PE, the PA, and the PEPs, needs to be scalable to handle fluctuations in user activity and data volume.
So it needs to be able to grow with the organization.
Absolutely. And finally, access policies themselves might restrict the reachability of certain PPs based on factors like geographic location or the risk level of the requesting asset.
So you might have different PPs for different levels of sensitivity. Exactly. So as you can see, network design in a zero trust world is much more nuanced than just providing basic connectivity. Now, before we delve further into the world of ZTA, I want to take a moment to once again thank our sponsor, Zero Trust CISO. Their website, zerotrustciso.com, is a treasure trove of information and resources, so be sure to check it out. And we'd also like to extend our gratitude to our CISO Marketplace sponsor, who connects security leaders with cutting-edge solutions and resources. You can learn more at cisomarketplace.services. Now back to our deep dive. We've talked a lot about the benefits of zero trust, but it's important to acknowledge that it's not a silver bullet. There are still potential threats and challenges that organizations need to be aware of. Absolutely, no security approach is perfect. So let's talk about some of the threats that are still relevant in a zero trust environment.
Yeah, because it's not like the bad guys just give up, right? Of course not. So one major concern is the potential subversion of the ZTA decision-making process itself. If an attacker manages to compromise the policy engine or the policy administrator, or if there are critical misconfigurations in the system, the entire security model can be undermined.
So the brain of the operation becomes a prime target.
Exactly. So protecting those core components is paramount. We also have to be prepared for denial of service or network disruption attacks that target the PE, the PA, or the PPs. Since these components are essential for authorizing all access, taking them offline can cripple an organization.
So even with zero trust, those core functions still need to be highly resilient.
Absolutely. And then there's the human element. Stolen credentials and insider threats are still a concern. While multi-factor authentication can greatly reduce the risk of unauthorized access due to compromised accounts, a malicious insider with valid credentials could still cause significant damage.
So it's not just about technology. It's about people and processes, too.
Exactly. Maintaining visibility on the network can also be challenging, especially with the rise of encrypted traffic. While Zero Trust emphasizes strong logging and metadata analysis, the actual content of encrypted communications might be hidden. But advancements in metadata analysis and machine learning are helping to address this challenge.
So it's like finding new ways to see in the dark.
In a way. And then there's the issue of data storage. The logs, the policies, all that sensitive information has to be stored somewhere, which makes it a potential target for attackers.
So it becomes another attack surface.
Right. And finally, there's the risk of vendor lock-in. If an organization becomes too reliant on a single vendor for their zero trust solution, it can be difficult and expensive to switch or integrate with other systems down the line.
So it's important to keep those long-term considerations in mind.
Absolutely. And one last threat that's particularly relevant to zero trust is the increasing use of non-person entities, or NPEs, in system administration. These can be things like automated scripts, APIs, or robotic process automation agents.
So essentially machines talking to machines.
Yeah, precisely. Now, while NPEs can improve efficiency, they also introduce new security challenges around authentication authorization and the potential for false positives or negatives in their actions.
So it's a double-edged sword.
You could say that. So while Zero Trust offers significant security advantages, it's crucial to be aware of these potential threats and address them proactively. So for organizations that are considering implementing Zero Trust, especially in the federal space, how does this approach align with existing cybersecurity guidance and initiatives?
Yeah, because it's not like they're starting from scratch, right?
Exactly. Zero Trust is meant to complement and enhance existing frameworks and best practices. For instance, it aligns perfectly with the NIST Risk Management Framework, or RMF, since Zero Trust is fundamentally a risk-based approach to security.
So it's about identifying and mitigating risks continuously.
Precisely. It also supports the goals of the Federal Identity Credential and Access Management, or FICAM initiative, by emphasizing the importance of strong and continuously validated identities.
So it's about knowing who has access to what and making sure that access is appropriate.
Right. And then there are initiatives like Trusted Internet Connections, or TTIC 3.0, and Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation, or CDM, which are being updated to incorporate Zero Trust principles.
So it's like Zero Trust is becoming the common thread that ties all these initiatives together.
In a way. And even broader strategies like Cloud Smart and the Federal Data Strategy, which focus on data inventory and assessment, align perfectly with the Zero Trust philosophy.
So it's about knowing your data, where it lives, and who has access to it.
Precisely. So Zero Trust is really a natural evolution of cybersecurity thinking, a way to bring together and strengthen existing best practices.
So for an organization that's ready to embark on the Zero Trust journey, where do they even begin? What are the first steps?
NIST provides a helpful roadmap for migrating to a Zero Trust architecture. And the very first step is to establish a solid baseline of competence.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly?
It means understanding your current environment in depth, knowing your assets, identifying all users and non-person entities, mapping your critical business processes, and understanding how data flows across your network.
So it's like taking inventory before you start rearranging the furniture.
Exactly. You can't secure what you don't know. So this initial phase involves conducting thorough surveys and assessments of your assets, your users, your data flows, and your existing workflows.
So there's a lot of upfront work, but it sounds crucial.
It is. Once you have that foundational understanding, you need to identify all the actors that interact with your systems, both human users and those non-person entities. You also need to catalog all your assets, both the ones you own and any associated non-owned assets.
So getting a complete picture of who's doing what and with what.
Right. The next step is to identify your key business processes and evaluate the risks associated with each of them. Then you can start formulating specific security policies for a carefully chosen zero trust candidate process.
So starting with a smaller project to test the waters.
Precisely. It's a good way to gain experience and refine your approach before rolling it out more broadly. And in parallel, you need to start identifying and evaluating potential zero trust solutions and technologies that align with your needs and your policies.
So it's like shopping for the right tools for the job.
Exactly. And once you have a solution in place, the initial deployment should be followed by rigorous monitoring and logging. You might even want to run it in a reporting-only mode at first to fine-tune your policies and identify any unintended consequences before enforcing them strictly.
So like a soft launch before the grand opening.
That's a good way to put it. And remember, the migration to zero trust should be incremental and iterative. You expand the implementation, gradually learning from each phase and adapting as you go.
So it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely. It's a journey of continuous improvement and adaptation.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into the world of zero trust architecture. It's clear that this approach represents a fundamental shift in how we think about cybersecurity. And it's a shift that's absolutely essential in today's world.
I completely agree. By moving away from the outdated model of a trusted network and embracing the principle of never trust, always verify, we can build a much more resilient and secure digital environment.
And while the journey to zero trust might seem complex, the NIST Special Publication 800-207 provides a solid framework and a roadmap for organizations to follow.
It's an invaluable resource for anyone who's serious about protecting their data and their systems in today's threat landscape.
And on that note, I'd like to leave our listeners with a final thought to ponder. This principle of never trust, always verify. How might you apply that in your own life? Not just to your technology, but to the information you consume, the people you interact with. What assumptions do you make on a daily basis, and how might you benefit from adopting a more questioning and verifying mindset? I encourage you to explore the NIST document further and to really think about the implications of this shift in thinking. It's not just about technology. It's about how we approach trust and security in a world that's increasingly complex and interconnected. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.